meeting Thursday, October 19th, and I'll just do a visual roll call. Mr. Davis is absent and everybody else is present. And I know there are no changes to the agenda, correct?
That's correct.
And is anybody here for public comment for something not on the agenda? Nope. Okay. Let's roll through these consent items. Does anybody have any corrections or comments on the meetings of September 21st? Kind of like I woke you guys all up, didn't I? Yeah, jumped right in, huh? Nope. Okay, so motion to approve those?
I'll move. Do you want to do all the consent items?
Let's just go through them once because I'm going to give Josh a chance to talk 2 sentences on B and C.
Okay. I'll move approval of the meeting minutes for September 21st.
I'll second.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And Mr. Keller abstained. He was not here. Then, Josh, you want to give us like 2 sentences on B and C, and then we'll just see if there's any questions.
I'll have Ms. Dyer talk about B, and then I can jump into C when she's done.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry, could you repeat what the question was?
2 sentences on item B.
Is that the groundwater monitoring program?
Yeah.
This is a monitoring program for our groundwater levels and chloride concentrations that we've been working with USGS for several decades on. It's data that we collect that's used for our groundwater modeling efforts. And at this point, the costs of the program, what we're seeing are actually a little bit less than last year. We are still monitoring for chlorides, but we scaled back a little bit on the expanded chloride sampling program because our wells have been shut down since last spring.
And any questions on that? Mr. Keller.
One brief question.
Okay.
Regarding the monitoring, here we go, monitoring for chloride, noted that if the well that we were talking about, the location of being halfway between the coast and the freeway, if it goes over 25% change, I guess that was, that the USGS would notify the city. Other than that, didn't see much of a description of the reporting that USGS would do on the resulting data. The Creeks monitoring data is on their website, but since they've been very slow in the past in reporting things, it would be interesting to get a little more detail about when they plan to report the chloride data and what format.
The reporting is all done on their website, which the link is provided in the draft council agenda report. So all of the water quality and water level data is available online. Sometimes there is a lag because they want to verify the data before making it official on the website, but they typically do post as soon as it's available.
But we never get a report saying your seawater intrusion situation is improving or
We've been, so staff will look at the data regularly and download it and analyze it ourselves to see how we're doing at this point. So that trigger in the monitoring plan for when that would trigger expanded chloride sampling was really just a notification that occurred at the beginning of the drought that we need to start paying attention and actually increasing our sampling. But since we've already done that, the staff is just monitoring the levels ourselves.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had a comment.
Go
There
ahead.
was a discrepancy in the overall cost between the council agenda report and I don't know if it got updated, but.
Yeah, good catch, Commissioner Kilborn. That's correct. The staff report was completed before the second version of the corrected contract
Okay, it looks like
arrived,
they-
so we have made that correction for the council version.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Well, I'd say with that, I'll move to approve item 5B.
Comment out there? Otherwise, I'll second the motion.
Go ahead and second. And come on up to the microphone. We'll let you fill one out later. But hang on just a second. So why don't you make your comment first, and then we'll listen there.
No, she was one.
Okay, okay. Go ahead.
Lindsay Baker, League of Women Voters. I want to say that we're pleased to see the groundwater monitoring on the agenda as we have brought this subject up in the past. And again, we're pleased to see it.
Thanks. Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Kilborn. Second. And all those in favor? Aye. Nobody opposed? Okay, Mr. Hagemart, number C.
Vice Chair Jordan, Commissioners, this is really great news. We have been pushing this project off to replace the El Cielito pump station for a while because of the drought and expenses of the drought. And finally getting around to moving forward with this project. Bids came in about $500,000 below the engineer's estimate. I do believe part of that was some scope change. The staff reduced some of the scope towards the end to try and fit the budget that we have, but we're really pleased with the bids. And as you can see in the staff report, there actually were clustered. We had, 3 contractors within $20,000 of each other, so we feel really confident that the low bid is a good number. And we are excited to get moving on this. El Cielito is a very important pump station and provides a lot of our water to the upper reaches of our service area, and in particular is very critical in wildfire conditions up there.
Okay, thanks.
One quick
Comments? Yep. Questions?
The water that's being pumped is South Coast conduit water?
Yes, it comes out of Sheffield Reservoir, or formerly known as Sheffield Reservoir.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve this?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. No other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's also unanimous. So we'll move on to the more meatier section. First one is introduction of an ordinance for assignment of state water project contract to the Central Coast Water Authority. At the end of this, we're looking for a recommendation to council on the introduction of the ordinance with our comments. Mr. Hagemart or Ms. Dyer.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name's Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and we have a visitor with us today, Mr. Steve Americaner, who is the legal counsel representing Central Coast Water Authority. We did also invite Ray Stokes, the Executive Director of CCWA. Unfortunately, he had another commitment today, but he will be available for when this is scheduled for council discussion on October 24th. So we will be presenting an introduction of an ordinance for assignment of the state water contract to Central Coast Water Authority. And a brief summary of the purpose is to receive authorization from council to amend the city's existing agreements with Central Coast Water Authority in order to fully effectuate assignment of the state water contract to CCWA. And so I'll be giving just a brief introduction on the city's state water supply and the role of CCWA, and then I will be turning it over to Mr. Americaner to describe the state water contract background, the purpose of pursuing the contract assignment, an overview of contract provisions, procedures, and next steps, and then we'll finish with the recommendation. So the city's state water supply, it has always been a drought supply for the city. On the chart to the right, you can see this water supply mix chart that is presented monthly to Water Commission. And it shows our water supplies for the last 6 or 7 years. And the orange bar is all the water that was received through the State Water Project. And so you can see that it really has been a vital part of our water supplies during this drought condition. The city has up to 3,300 acre feet per year contracted for state water. And as we know, the allocations from the State Department of Water Resources can vary. And so what we've done during droughts, really the benefit of state water for us has been its connectedness to the rest of the state. Having that infrastructure in place has allowed us to pursue supplemental water purchases as well as out-of-region groundwater banking, which has enabled us to continue to keep the pipe flowing full during the drought condition. And so for the role of CCWA, they are a Joint Powers Authority. The city is a member of CCWA, and Councilmember White sits on the board of directors at CCWA. That organization is responsible for the regional distribution and treatment of state water. So they really are the agency, both from a financial and an operational management perspective. That's where their responsibilities are for regional state water supplies. And CCWA has represented us in coordinating with the Department of Water Resources and other state water contractors, and has been instrumental in securing the supplemental water purchases that have been a critical part of our water supplies.
Chairman?
Go ahead.
Quick question. In the pale green or blue, I presume, is the locations that are served by state water?
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and so now I will turn it over to Mr. Americaner for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Steve Americaner. I'm General Counsel at CCWA. I've served in that job since the agency was formed in 1991. And so I've got a fair degree of background when it comes to the history and the reason for the presentation before you today and the request to the City Council. The State Water Project was actually created in the 1950s, and contracts with 29 different counties around California were signed in the early 1960s. The contract between the state and Santa Barbara County was signed in 1963. The original contract amount was for 57,700 acre feet, but it did not involve the construction, the actual construction of any facilities to deliver water from the state water system to Santa Barbara County. The first effort to build those facilities happened in 1978 when there was a countywide bond measure proposed to build the in-county facilities. That was defeated amid a lot of concerns that bringing in state water was going to promote a lot of growth on the Central Coast. So it was a very controversial issue. Following that vote, the Board of Supervisors considered simply terminating its contract with the state of California. The local cities and water districts in this county went to the Board of Supervisors and urged the board not to do that, but instead to turn over the financial responsibility for the state water option to the local cities and water districts. The county sent out a questionnaire to all of the cities and water districts and asked those cities and water districts how much water they would be willing to pay for to preserve this option. And the results of that questionnaire are in the last bullet on that slide. The county entered into agreements with all the interested water agencies and cities for 45,486 acre feet. The rest of it, no one signed up for, and so the county then signed an agreement with the state to relinquish back to the state the difference between 57.7 and 45,486, about 12,000 acre feet, which remains to this day in the hands of the state of California, not held by the county.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, if the 1978 bond measure had passed, would facilities have been built in San Luis Obispo County the way the existing facilities are? I mean, I don't think you can get there within Santa Barbara County.
That's true. And I think the route, I don't know that the facilities were actually designed. They may have been, but I think the route is largely the same as the route that was ultimately built in the late 1990s, and that is the state water. As you know, there's the Central California Aqueduct, which runs parallel to Interstate 5, and at Kettleman City, there's a branch that reaches over to San Luis Obispo County. It's called the Coastal Branch Phase 1, and it runs up the hill adjacent to Route 41. I think it's 41 or 46. I can't remember which. And stopped there. And then CCWA with the state built the rest of the facility into San Luis Obispo County, and then running more or less parallel to the 101 down next to Vandenberg Air Force Base, down to the river, the San Ynez River, and then over to Lake Cachuma in the late 1990s. So yes, the long answer to your short question, the route was the same as was ultimately built.
Thank you.
So in 1991, a second effort was made to secure public support for State Water. That was in the 5th year of the late 1980s drought, which started in 1986. And there was a good deal of concern at that point about the stability of the Central Coast water supplies. And so State Water was put on the ballot in 14 local jurisdictions. In 11 jurisdictions, the voters approved it. In 3 jurisdictions, they said no. And those 11 jurisdictions then cooperated in forming the Central Coast Water Authority as a joint powers agency to administer the water rights, build the facilities, and operate the facilities. And that was done between 1991 and 1997, when water was actually started to be delivered through the system to the Central Coast. Also in 1991, CCWA and the county entered into this agreement, the Transfer of Financial Responsibility Agreement. So you'll remember that in 1963, the original agreement with the state of California was signed by the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. The state would only contract with county-level agencies in the 1960s, and that was true for Santa Barbara County as well. The agreements entered into by the county to the local water agencies and cities in the 1980s transferred a lot of those rights over to those local jurisdictions, those local water purveyors, who then formed CCWA. So it was then necessary to build this facility for CCWA and the county to agree that CCWA would take over all of the financial responsibility for the portion of the state water contract that was going to be delivered, namely 45,486 acre-feet. So an agreement was signed, approved by CCWA and the Board of Supervisors, and it transferred all those responsibilities over and contemplated the eventual assignment of the state water contract from the county to CCWA. The problem in 1991 was that the state would not agree to a full assignment, even though that was contemplated in this agreement between the county and CCWA, largely because the county had the authority to impose taxes as the ultimate guarantee of these payments, but the local agencies did not. And we're going to come to that issue here in a moment. But the agreement itself contemplated at the county level and at the local level that there would be this full assignment of this contract over to the local jurisdictions. So we'll go to the next slide. The purpose of pursuing the assignment now is that CCWA really is in the driver's seat when it comes to making the critical policy decisions with respect to the state water project. So if you think about the structure of the existing contractual arrangements, you have the state of California at the top, you have the county of Santa Barbara at the next level, you have CCWA at the third level, and then you have the city of Santa Barbara and the other local water retailers at the fourth level. The purpose of this contract assignment is to reduce the 4 levels to 3 levels, to try and simplify the decision-making process for all of the decisions that are going to come up in the future with respect to state water. For 30 years, the county has had no ongoing either management or fiscal responsibility for this project. Its position as the second level in this structure that I've just described is really an anomaly. And there's no reason to have them there functionally. And frankly, it makes it a whole lot simpler to have 3 levels rather than 4 levels. So that's the point of the second bullet. It would streamline local bureaucratic process. Third, from the point of view of the city of Santa Barbara and the other local purveyors, you have a seat at the table at CCWA. CCWA, as Kelly described it, is a joint powers agency. There are 8 members. All 8 members sit on at the decision-making table. Councilmember White is the city's representative there. So the city has a direct voice in the decisions being made by CCWA, along with the other 7 agencies that are members. That is not true at the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors, of course, are 5 members who are elected by people in various districts around the county, but they don't directly represent the city or the Glader Water District, Montecito, or Santa Maria, or any of the others. And so whatever influence the city has of the Board of Supervisors is indirect at best, as opposed to having a direct voice and a seat at the table. The purpose of this assignment is to put the key decisions in the hands of those who have the direct stake in the future and have a seat at the table. And that's why we believe that doing this assignment will be ultimately in the interests of both the City of Santa Barbara and all of the other agencies that are members of CCWA. It also, this assignment aligns the decision-making responsibility with the fiscal responsibility. The City of Santa Barbara and the other 7 agencies have the direct fiscal responsibility for paying for the state water. And at the same time, some of the key decisions are not in their hands. And we think that government operates best when both responsibility and decision-making power are linked together. They're aligned with each other. That's the point of the 4th bullet on there. And then finally, we think that CCWA has been at the forefront of the innovation and creative thinking about how to bring more water to the Central Coast. One of the points that people keep on making about the State Water Project is that it's not about water, it's about plumbing. That the principal benefit of the State Water Project was to create a physical connection to the rest of the state, so that the water resources that are available in the rest of the state in times of drought in particular can, through market mechanisms, make water available to the Central Coast to relieve some of the hardships that are created here when we have a drought. And that's the kind of innovation that's needed to deal with California's very significant water shortage issues in future years. So the next slide. I mentioned earlier that the state water contract signed in 1963 has a property tax levy provision. So one of the problems that the state faces with the State Water Project is to ensure that there will always be money to pay the bills. And that assurance is necessary because the state borrows money from the national bond market in order to build these very expensive water facilities, these capture and distribution facilities. The bond market requires that there be an assured source of repayment for those bonds. The 1963 contract includes a provision authorizing the imposition of a property tax in the event that there's a default in the payment. If, in the unlikely event that one of the local purveyors, a city or a water district, can't pay its bills and therefore just stops paying its bills, the county has the authority to impose a property tax countywide to try and make up that shortfall. That property tax authority has never been utilized in Santa Barbara County, and frankly, nobody ever expects it to be utilized because people, in fact, regularly pay their water bills. One of the reasons that water projects are so readily financed in the national bond market is because the bond market knows that people pay their water bills because people want their water. But nonetheless, this guarantee, this last step guarantee, is in the state water contract. Until the last 2 years, it wasn't clear that CCWA could do what the county can do, which is to levy a property tax as the ultimate guarantee. In 2015, the state legislature changed the Joint Powers Authority law and made it possible for CCWA to do this. And it was that change that opened the door to this particular solution, creating the assignment of the state water contract from the state to, from the county down to the local water purveyors. And so that's what is included in the documents that the City Council will take a look at on Tuesday, a specific authority by CCWA to levy a property tax in the event that any of the agencies defaults on its payment, preventing CCWA from making its payments to the state of California. So this slide goes into the details of that issue, this ability to levy a tax. As I said, this is a requirement of the state water contracts. The state will not do an assignment without this provision in it. The tax remedy is a last resort. The contracts between CCWA and the City of Santa Barbara and the other cities and water districts include a series of steps that are designed to ensure that payments are made, that all the payments are made all the way through the system. I'll give you one example. There is in the existing agreements between CCWA and the city what's known as a step-up provision. And the step-up provision says that if one of CCWA's members fails to make its payments as required and when due, the other agencies in that region have an obligation to step up and make that payment and take over a corresponding amount of the water from the defaulting agency. So, in essence, all of the agencies are linked together with a set of cross guarantees. Everybody stands ready to help everybody else and step up and then take their water. That step-up provision is triggered before we ever get to the taxes. So if you look at the next slide, the existing remedies, the first remedy, as I said, is the step-up provision. The second remedy is that the CCWA has the authority to terminate the supply agreement for a defaulting agency and sell those rights, sell that water to another agency and collect money to make up for the default. And then the third remedy is to levy the property tax to ensure payment to DWR. And as I say, none of these have ever actually been implemented. They've never proved to be necessary, but there are three levels of protection, all designed to assure the bond market that there's always going to be enough money to repay the people who lend the money to build these facilities.
Can I slow you down with a question? So you're like jointly and severally responsible, so to speak. What happens in the situation of a specific natural disaster that shuts down a member unit so they have nothing to sell, nobody has to pay anything, and has that ever been contemplated?
It has been contemplated, but I'm not sure there's a very good answer to the question because it depends on what it is that has failed, what part of the system has failed. I think if the Delta were to fail in an earthquake, for example, and DWR were unable to deliver water to Southern California, I don't think that any of the Southern California agencies would continue to make their payments, and I don't think anybody at the state level would expect them to.
Okay.
And as the last point on this slide says, the existing remedies remain in place. There's no other change to the contractual arrangements other than CCWA steps into the shoes of the county. So the specific actions that we're going to be asking the City Council to take on Tuesday is to amend two agreements. One is the agreement among the cities and water districts known as the Joint Powers Agreement. That's the agreement that formed CCWA, and that's to authorize CCWA to enter into a contract with DWR. CCWA is an agency that exercises the powers of its members, and the agreement among them needs to be explicit about the powers that it's exercising. So this proposed contract directly between CCWA and the state needs to be authorized in the Joint Powers Agreement itself. And then secondly, every individual contract between CCWA and its 8 members, including the City of Santa Barbara, needs to be amended to confirm that CCWA has the power to levy a tax as the ultimate guarantee. So, is that back to you, Kelly?
Sure, I can take it. So the next steps are, this is the schedule. Back in June, this previously happened, that was when CCWA board directed its staff to pursue the contract assignment. We're now in October, and this item is going to all the boards and councils of CCWA for approval. On October 26th, CCWA will be discussing this item, and by year end and early 2018, the next steps would be to pursue county agreement to assign the contract as well as DWR consent to the agreement. And our recommendation is that council introduce and subsequently adopt an ordinance approving and authorizing an amendment to the water supply agreement between the city and CCWA, and an amendment to the CCWA Joint Powers Agreement.
Okay, so questions, and eventually we'll get to a call for public comment. I saw some people walk in. If there's anybody here that's interested in public comment on this, might be a white slip over there, not a green slip, a white slip, if you'd fill it out, and I'll try and remember. So questions from the commission? Mr.
Chairman?
Keller.
First of all, I appreciate the remarks about the physical structure being important, because the ability to wheel water from Northern California was certainly a great help to the city during the recent or still existing drought. I have two other questions, however, one of which is the money that's owed to DWR, could that wind up including money to pay for the twin tunnels, and who would make that decision? And the second question is that we recently had a report from the county grand jury recommending that the county assume more authority over the local water agencies, and this appears to be going in the opposite direction. So I wondered if the grand jury has an opinion about this whole process.
So let me tackle the second question first, then come back to the first one, if I may. We were surprised by the grand jury report, and we thought that the grand jury maybe did not talk to all of the people involved in water policy making in Santa Barbara County before making that recommendation, because that's certainly not consistent with the trend historically and recently for water policy decision making. And yes, you're correct. This proposal runs in the opposite direction from that recommended by the grand jury, and we think the grand jury's recommendation is probably not well supported and don't agree with it. And then secondly, when it comes to the twin tunnels, that decision is most likely going to be made by DWR. DWR most recently has taken the position that the twin tunnel project is within the ambit of the authority that DWR has under the statute that was adopted in the 1950s to build, operate, improve, maintain, sustain the State Water Project. And they view the twin tunnels as a necessary new element of the project in order to comply with that statutory mandate. And at the moment, at least, the DWR is taking the position that the 29 contractors will all be in on that project, even if one or more of them decides that they don't want to support it. Now, I have to say that from what I hear of the politics of the situation, that position may or may not be sustained in the future, because there are some agencies around the state who have expressed some disagreement with the idea of proceeding with the Twin Tunnel project, and it is certainly a controversial one. And so it's too early to know definitively how that particular issue is going to be resolved, but for the moment at least, DWR is taking the position that all the agencies are going to be bound to participate in the project.
All this would apply to monies that we would allegedly, according to DWR, owe them for the twin tunnels.
That's correct. Now, what I need to tell you as well is that the decision before you today and before the council on Tuesday doesn't have any effect on the Twin Tunnel project. That, what I've just described to you about the Twin Tunnel project, is true whether the county is the contractor or whether CCWA is the contractor. It doesn't change the dynamics of that decision in any way.
Thank you.
Ms. Bernie.
Mr. Americana, Ms. Dyer, thank you very much for your report and for this presentation. I'll admit, all my years on the Water Commission, I never fully understood why the county held the contract, and now it's very clear. I can actually go back to the public and talk about this in an educated manner, so thank you very much. I've got two kind of perspective questions. One is for Councilmember White, since you do sit on the board. What's your perspective on this? And then also, what's the feedback from the county? Are they in support of this? Where are they coming to the table on this?
I kind of had the same question. What's the county's, opinion on this? Are they going to have any pushback against it?
Okay.
I kind of have the same question, like, who won't like it? I mean,
and that was going to be my question too, which I'd like to ask Mr. Americana, as long as you were asking questions, but you were asking me one first. I am extremely enthusiastic about this change. think about what we put into our water supply in terms of energy, in terms of thought. You folks meet monthly, and you look into the complications and responsibilities. Our council does, again, how much does the council do? Well, a quarter of what you do or less, but still that consciousness is there, in particular around rates. I mean, we get serious about, that's just one of those hot button issues. All of that does not happen at the county level. So there's this anesthesia that goes on about the vitality of water, about the essence of water. Obviously, everybody here knows it's critical, but so that's one piece of it, is that the knowledge and intent is so much stronger at our local level. And of course, you get to the Montecito Water District, you get to the other ones, and that whole government structure, all they do is water. Same with CCWA, of course, that's what they do is water. And again, as you've heard me talk about CCWA, it happens to be one of the strongest local agencies that we have, so that it provides you get a sense of credibility there that's so much stronger than most other agencies that we have on every topic. You just there are serious fights that go on, but it is just such a professional. You really feel like there's you have a strong advocacy and you have a strong set of technicians working for you and us on that basis. So that's a long answer to your short question, as Mr. Americano said, that I'm very enthusiastic about that. And I would sort of pull my question that I was going to ask of you is, how are the other jurisdictions doing on this? If you could give us a little bit of where do we sit in the context of agencies with which we have a lot of disagreements. At this point, Carpinteria and Goleta and ID1 would be three of them where we're struggling to line up our interests and continue the collaboration. So I'm interested to know how we're doing regionally in terms of gaining this sense of support.
So I can give you a few data points on those questions. One, when this issue came to the CCWA board in June to authorize the staff to prepare the paperwork for this move, the CCWA board unanimously, all 8 members, voted to proceed and to approve this. All 8 agencies are now in the process of doing what you're doing, which is to bring back to their governing boards these contracts. The ones that have acted so far have all approved these contracts. We have another 2 or 3 that are happening in the next week, and then CCWA is scheduled to take it up on October 26th, which is next Thursday. And by then, we expect all 8 to have acted and all 8 to have approved it. So we're expecting the decision among the 8 members to be unanimous. It's as Councilmember White said, it's a rare situation of unanimity among agencies that sometimes disagree with each other about various issues. So this is a good sign. When it comes to predicting what happens at the Board of Supervisors, I have a few data points. One is in 1991 when the contract, Transfer of Financial Responsibility contract was signed. That contract was approved unanimously by the then Board of Supervisors. And that contract includes a stated intent to assign the contract over to CCWA. Now, we will endeavor to remind the Board of Supervisors about that statement of intent in 1991. Whether it has any persuasive effect in 2017 remains to be seen. We also believe that the support by the 8 local agencies communicated to the Board of Supervisors directly will be very helpful in convincing the board that this is in the best interest of the people of the county of Santa Barbara. And we will be asking our 8 members to directly communicate with their supervisors to try and persuade them that this is a good thing to do. We are optimistic that the Board of Supervisors will see the value and wisdom in doing this, and I don't think we would have undertaken this if we thought it was hopeless. We don't think it's hopeless. We think actually that they're going to ultimately approve it because it makes sense. It's a true bit of good government moving forward in this fashion. It's not to say there isn't going to be a robust debate at the Board of Supervisors, perhaps even a dissent from one or more members, but we believe that it will be approved there, and it'll happen likely before the end of the year. If not then probably before in the first month or two of 2018.
Mr. Chair, if I can,
Yes, sir.
we're a little bit jumping around on this, but the area where I would ask Mr. Americano to bring back to through this whole system is the clearly Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara is a small fish, relatively speaking, in this whole system. We have a seat at the table, but obviously Santa Maria is the major player there. But to the extent that first of all, the South Coast itself gets some recognition like we have at SBCAG, where, again, we end up getting lost a little bit in the larger picture when the whole county-wide picture is looked at. But the South Coast is recognized more strongly as a regional entity, and that our decisions and our activities are happening here. In narrative, I can appreciate in contracts and so forth, there's going to be majority rule and such, but just that aspect of it, that recognition, I think will be useful in terms of just keeping people comfortable that we're not going to get rolled over.
The history of CCWA validates what you're suggesting, that the 8 agencies have been remarkably cooperative in dealing with regional issues. And the best example I can give you is the decision that was made by CCWA to authorize the installation of a pipeline coming up into Lake Cachuma during the drought in order to bring more water into the lake for delivery to the South Coast. That decision was principally to meet the needs of the South Coast. It was going to be paid for by the South Coast. Santa Maria voluntarily abstained when the vote came to the CCWA board. It abstained from voting on it and left the decision largely to the South Coast. Santa Maria is acutely aware of its position at CCWA and has exercised its position very responsibly over the years.
And what Santa Barbara has done in return, maybe not in return, but I think it's an important piece here, is that Santa Barbara has lobbied with the Board of Supervisors on behalf of Santa Maria to allow Santa Maria to take over a piece of our non-table A, is that the proper term? Mm-hmm. Allocation. So they want to buy some of that surplus or extra allocation that you heard about early in this conversation. So that's the kind, again, a thing of goodwill, of just trying to work cooperatively together, and hopefully that's. My hope is that doesn't get lost in history, as that 10 or 20 years from now, the people don't forget that cooperation has happened from the South Coast level.
Other questions?
Just to follow up on that, for my information, is Santa Maria, is that the city of Santa Maria, or is there a separate water district there?
No, it's the city of Santa Maria.
Thank you.
No, not dissing our staff, but don't you just wish you could require these guys to come over for dinner once a month and just talk water, right? Pretty sure that's in your next contract. So yours too.
Got it.
So only question I had was buried somewhere in there was the evolution from being able to tax everybody that owned property in county to our particular relationship. Just if it ever came to that, if you went through those steps, you'd only be able to tax city residents, ratepayers, and we would have to find some other means to chase our non-city type users. And is that path, if that had to happen, is there a pathway there that's reasonable and we would be able to recoup that?
if that were to ever occur, it is speculative if that were ever to occur in the future, and we would have to assess the circumstances at the time. For example, those customers may have been annexed by the time that this ever occurs, and then that would resolve the issue. But in the event that they haven't been annexed, we would look at our options by assessing a fee through the Prop 218 process. But we would have to assess that at the time.
Okay. All right. Then I didn't see anybody jump up for public comment, so we'll just move on to comments we may have. Anybody? Mr. Cowell?
Well, on the face of it, reducing the number of government agencies involved in something by 25% sounds like a good idea. I'm not sure we're reducing the actual bureaucratic process by 25%, but I would certainly favor that idea philosophically.
Okay. Nobody else? I just have a couple comments, and that's one that there's some people out there that are going to look at 5 pages of a staff report, and the only words they're going to see are levy and tax. And you do have a paragraph in here somewhere that says this is not, but I think that should be certainly part of your public presentation next Tuesday, right up front or right in the middle or right at the end or all throughout, because there will people that that's the only word they see in 5 pages, and they'll just have a bad feeling about that. And the other is that who's ever involved when this goes to Board of Supervisors, I think it'd be nice to give this commission a heads up. There's probably several of us that have reasonable relationships with at least 2 supervisors that are local, and they seem to have no trouble reaching out to some of us when they have a county project that's mired in a city process, so we could also return the favor and advocate for a city process being approved by the Board of Supervisors. So I will just say personally, and I see Megan nodding her head too, that if we get a heads up on that, I'd certainly be willing to reach out to at least the 2 I have good relationships with.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Looking for a motion to recommend then.
I'll move recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. So that's unanimous. Thank you for your presentation, both staff and Mr. Americano. I'm really holding you to dinner once a month, really. Okay. Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
There's this is, what do they call it? Is this an Archimedean Day? There's not only this is an important water meeting today, but there's an important fire meeting going on as we speak. So I'm going to be going to that and missing the rest of this.
All right. We'll miss you. Okay, let's move on to Stage 3 drought update. Ms. Dyer, you're up again.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to be going through the status of the drought and our water demands, review our water supply strategy, and our water supply status. This is the most recent chart from the National Weather Service, and as you can see, our area still remains in a drought condition. We do expect that to continue. We don't expect any change in that until we see what happens with the rainy season this winter. We receive most of our rainfall January through March timeframe. So again, just a reminder that we are still in a drought. Our water demands, this shows our monthly tracking of our water demands. We had a 45% reduction in water use in September compared with our pre-drought demands. So still, community is exceeding our expectations in terms of conservation. And we've had 40% conservation as our 12-month running average. This is the chart showing our total water use going back to the 1980s. So this first dip here is the last major drought in our area. And here we are today. Our water use has actually just crossed the line where we're now using less than we were at the low point of the last drought in the 90s. And our water supply strategy has been updated. October 1st marked the beginning of a new water year. So now we are just starting the 7th year since Kachuma last spilled. And so what we've done is to extend our projections out one more year through 2020. And we've updated our water supplies for last year to reflect actual water use. And so last year, you can see this blue bar is Gibraltar. That made up the majority of our water supply last year. So the spring rains of 2017 really helped us out in our water supply for this year. We also had 40% conservation for last year, which is why this white bar is larger than the rest. We continue to plan for 30% conservation target through the next 3 years, but we'll have to reassess that after the winter rains. So next spring was when we would reassess our supply strategy and our conservation target. Some other highlights are for state water, that's the orange bar. We're assuming a 45% allocation this year and then a 35% allocation the next 2 years. But our planning assumes that pipe will continue to be flowing at full. So if we get a less than 100% allocation, we'll have to assess whether we go out and pursue supplemental water purchases. Again, the timing of that would be next spring after we see what happens with the rains this winter. The yellow bar is our groundwater, so you can see we're not planning on using our groundwater this year. We shut down the wells last spring to rest the basins, and we do continue to exercise the wells as backup water supply if Kachuma water quality is too challenging to treat because of the Whittier fire. We would have our groundwater wells as a backup water supply. The projections assume no significant inflows to Gibraltar and Kachuma for the next 3 years as well. So water supply status, we have Gibraltar is currently at 48% of capacity at 2,500 acre feet. It stopped spilling in early May, and since then we have been maximizing our diversions up to our water rights, and the water quality remains good. And we are also planning to hold on to about 1,500 acre feet at Gibraltar as backup supply, given the Whittier fire situation we're facing this winter. We would like to maintain flexibility in using Gibraltar if we need to. So Kachuma is currently at 41% of capacity at about 78,700 acre feet. The data reported on the Bureau's website is under review. They had a malfunction in their pressure transducer, so the lake elevation is being reviewed. It may change and be updated on the website. It may be more or less than what's reported right now. And so for now, they've held off on issuing our 40% allocation that was anticipated on October 1st, wanting to resolve those lake elevation issues. And so hopefully that gets resolved this month, and we will have our allocation before the end of the month. Not all water stored in Kachuma is project water, so we're a small piece of that 78,000 acre feet. We've included in our water resources managers report to Water Commission every month the chart that shows the breakdown of the different accounts of water, whether it be downstream water rights or fish accounts.
Who makes that chart?
The county has been making that chart.
So if the last item, the CCWA, takes over that contract, would they take over that role going forward?
No, the county has that role because they're the contractor for the Kachuma contract, which is different than the state water contract. Okay. So the previous item doesn't really affect their role on the Kachuma project. Downstream water rights releases are underway. They began in mid-August, and we expect they'll continue likely through November. The upside of that is that we don't have, it counts towards our fish requirements, so we don't have to do additional releases of project water. But it is a substantial amount of water that's being released. Last I checked, it was about 10,000 acre feet, and it continues. Their goal is to recharge the groundwater basins in the Lompoc area. And as I understand, the water is reaching that point now. So probably in November is when I've heard they might shut down the releases. And as for the Whittier fire, I don't have any significant news on that. We have not yet heard on the funding for the Bureau of Reclamation. They submitted a grant to do some mitigation on the Bureau lands for the Whittier fire. So no news on that at this point. The county will be discussing this issue on November 3rd. So if you're interested in tuning into that.
A quick question regarding the downstream releases. You said they're trying to recharge the groundwater basin in Lompoc. Does that mean that some water levels as measured in Lompoc will be the trigger for shutting down the releases?
That's the decision is made by the Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District. So I would expect they have a number of decision factors, but and that they're monitoring water levels in the Lompoc Plain. But it's ultimately their decision on when they shut down the releases.
Thank you.
So the city's imported water, I don't have any significant change in status since last month. We have about 2,100 acre feet of imported water stored in Kachuma, and we have about 1,600 acre feet stored at San Luis Reservoir. We continue to bring down that water up to our pipeline capacity, given the risk of spill at San Luis next spring. San Luis is currently 100% full, so there is a high likelihood that any water would spill next spring. And if we continue to maximize our deliveries from the reservoir, we will have somewhere around 500 acre feet at risk of spill. So we've substantially reduced our risk compared to last year when we had about 4,000 acre feet in storage. We have returned about 2,900 acre feet of our debt owed to AVEC this year. We have approximately 3,300 acre feet of remaining water debt to be paid off in the next 10 years. And I guess just at the bottom of this slide, just a reminder that our current pipeline capacity for the city is about 280 acre feet per month. And those deliveries will shut down in November. The State Department of Water Resources does an annual shutdown for maintenance. This is a regular occurrence. So there's about a 2 to 3 week time frame when we won't be receiving water.
The water that's returned to AVEC, does that mean it is physically sent down to Antelope Valley, or is it just a matter of transferring accounts in San Luis?
The transfer occurs at San Luis, and then it physically would go to AVEC at that point. So it's physically delivered to AVEC, but we do the transfer at San Luis Reservoir. Mm-hmm. And groundwater, no change in status since we have shut down the wells as of the spring of 2017. Groundwater levels have improved, but they're not back. They're not fully recovered, which is expected to take several years. And again, our wells are being exercised regularly in case we need them as backup. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Hagmark for an update on the desalination project.
So no change in status at this point. They're still contractually, they're in the acceptance testing phase. The contractor is very eager to finish that phase and move on, but we want to make sure that every part of that contractual requirements are met before we release them from that. Prop 1 funding, we did get the latest on that. We did hear from DWR that they're scheduled to let us know about an award announcement has slipped. They're now saying December. I'm holding my breath that it's probably going to be sometime next year, just given how they came to blow through deadlines typically. So if we don't hear something, don't panic yet, but we are watching that, and I'll be sure to get something out once we do hear something back.
Now I'll turn it over to Madeline Ward for an update on the city's water conservation program.
Good Good morning, members of the Water Commission. My name is Madeline Ward. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor, and today I'm going to talk to you about our wonderful Garden Wise TV show. This is our long-running sustainable landscaping TV show. It started in 2006 with the Garden Wise Guys and was rebranded in 2011 to a magazine-style format called Garden Wise TV. So this, at this point, we've produced 33 episodes of Garden Wise TV, and it's hosted by Becky Davis of City TV and produced by City TV, along with the County Water Agency, City Water Resources, Goleta Water District, and several other water purveyors. And you can go to the next slide. So our new episode that we're very excited about that is now airing is called Take Your Landscape to the Next Level with Trees. We start off that segment, some of that text got cut off, by showcasing the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden's new WaterWise home demonstration garden. And if you haven't seen this garden, it's really beautiful. I encourage you to check it out. It is brand new. It was put started in late fall and finished up in spring. And we have some great signage there. You can see a little bit of it there in the corner. And it demonstrates the practices done in that garden to collect rainwater, divert gray water, use appropriate plants, and mulch. The next portion is with our very own Kathy Perret, Water Resources Specialist with the city, and she shows you how to best water your trees during drought, and she showcases 3 different methods in which to do that. Next, we have a segment with Oscar Carmona of the Green Gardener program, and he shows you how to better prune specifically fruit trees and smaller trees for better plant health. You might have pest issues, crossed branches, etc., and getting rid of that extra material or dead material can help reduce the water use of that plant. Next, we move on to a design segment, and this is with local landscape architect Billy Goodnick. He's working with a couple clients who just have, the general square of lawn in their backyard, and they're not sure how to reimagine that space so that they can have a usable, functional, and beautiful space. So he shows them a few different design ideas. And we wrap it up with a great segment about the history of dragon trees in Santa Barbara. That specimen right there is at Alameda Park, and Santa Barbara is home to some of the largest dragon trees in the country. And all of those episodes can be found at our website, and they're also on our YouTube channel and airing on local television. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation, so we'll take any questions.
Questions or comments? Really? So, is it bad to say that we don't want this winter to have heavy rains and we'll better see Kachuma perform than if we do have heavy rains?
I think what we're hoping for is gentle rains.
Gentle but long.
Right.
So,
gentle and steady rain.
Yeah, it's a tough quandary, right? And then, when you mentioned several times reassessment after winter rains, when a couple times when we were looking at the color chart. So, is it a good question to ask for a response sometime before May, before winter rains, on what that chart would end up looking like if we had a rainy year similar to last year, but without February 10th weekend, and Northern California had a rainy year similar to 2 years ago. So we'd have a reduction in water coming to us from Northern California, and we had no local water here. It would certainly affect the recharge of our groundwater basin, and I think next year you grow that from nothing to, or 2 years you grow that significantly from nothing to significant again. So is it too early to talk about what that starts looking like and opining on what other choices are, or is it always an assessment after winter rains?
We've typically done it after winter rains since it's speculative. Right now, what our supply planning is based on is what we think we can count on. We can certainly run a scenario hypothetically saying, what if we get Gibraltar spilling this year? What does our supply mix look like? But it isn't something that we can necessarily count on. So that's
So I guess you're speculating, what is the speculating that you will have average rain, less than average rain, no rain?
our supply projections assume that little to no rain. So
Okay.
anything
All right.
we don't expect. We're planning for no significant inflows to Gibraltar or Kachuma,
Okay.
which is what we've been
Like
experiencing.
I get told at home all the time, I'm cup half empty. So I appreciate that perspective much more. Mr. Keller.
Years ago, we used to contribute money to cloud seeding programs. I haven't heard any mention of that. Is that anything that we have to do with nowadays?
The county is the agency that runs that program, and it has been an ongoing program for many years. This year, they've decided to scale back because of the Whittier fire. We really don't want heavy rains because of the potential for sediment and ash coming into Kachuma. So they will be suspending that program for this year.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilburn.
I had a question about conservation. We've had pretty high conservation rates last month, which is great, but how does that play into our financial side of things? I know things will probably taper off in the winter because we usually don't get that great of conservation. But
Well, what's interesting so far is we are coming in right on target with sales, and that's we're taking a look at our model and numbers, but right now we are meeting what we had projected we would bring in, which is confusing, and I agree. But I think part of the challenge is the numbers that we represent are related to production. So unfortunately, that's the most easily available data that we have is the production number. So we're reporting that we're using 45% less water than we did in 2013 we produced. However, that correlation with actual water used in the system, there's system losses that occur, and those have been shrinking. So people may be still using more water, even though our production numbers are down. There's less lost water. We're looking into that, but I think for now we are pleased that we're still coming in because yes, for our model was set around a 30% conservation for the community. So at this point, it is something that we're watching every month and trying to drill down and find out where the discrepancies come in. Certainly something that we think AMI would help to shed some light on because as you all know how our water billing goes, we're reading meters every day, bills are going out every day, so it's really hard to get a snapshot of water usage and line that up with production so that you can actually see where every drop is going. So someday we'll have that information.
I would also add that we didn't anticipate demands to rebound immediately when we were doing our financial planning for rates, and so that did assume a slower rebound in water use than going from 40% immediately to 30%.
Good. All right. Thank you. Move on to your next item, regional agencies update.
Sure. Thank you. So this is our monthly update on the three agencies that the city is a member of as part of joint powers authorities. And so the first I'll discuss is COME, the Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board, which is an agency that's responsible for the conveyance facilities of Kachuma water to the south coast, basically from our intake at Kachuma all the way through Tecolote Tunnel, and then the South Coast Conduit delivering water to Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, and Montecito. And the next board meeting will be this Monday, October 23rd at 2 p.m. One of the highlights from the last board meeting was that COME has been investigating water rates charges from the Bureau of Reclamation, who is the owner and operator of the Bradbury Dam. Reclamation has stated to COME that they have about a $1.4 million deficit from FY15 and 16. They haven't identified the deficit for FY17, and they project a deficit of $1.2 million in FY18. So those are pretty large numbers, and COMB is looking for an explanation on why they went over budget before paying those. And we haven't received an invoice at this point. It's just been something that's been a discussion item between COMB and Reclamation. I know they're also looking into ways to pay back, if assuming that charges are justified, that there would be a payback over a certain number of years rather than an immediate payback in one bill. So they're looking at options, and there's more to come on that. I will say that for this year, our COMB budget was less than last year because we don't have the emergency pump project in operation. So that was some savings compared to previous years. So who knows how this might net out. It may just end up being a status quo budget once all of this is kind of balanced out in the end. And then for CCRB, as I understand, the CCRB is recruiting for a new executive director, and that posting is out. I believe the posting closes at the end of October, so that recruitment is underway. The next board meeting for CCRB will be on November 16th here at the city at 10 a.m., although it coincides with our Water Commission meeting. And as for CCWA, the next board meeting will be on October 26th. A discussion item will be assignment of the state water contract. And then I just wanted to kind of follow up on the discussion from last month on Cal Water Fix. There have been a few agencies that have voted on their support of the Cal Water Fix. Some of the big agencies that DWR was really interested in are Metropolitan Water District, Kern County Water Agency, and then Santa Clara. And they all voted in support of this. So as I understand, DWR is going to continue to press on and move forward with figuring out how to make the project happen. However, what they haven't received at this point is any support from, there have been no agencies receiving federal water that have supported the project. And as you recall from the costs, they assumed that 45% of the costs would be paid for by federal contractors. So if, in fact, the federal agencies are not supportive of it, I think what DWR will consider is a smaller size, scaling down the size of pipelines, smaller facilities, which would then change the cost. So there's a lot more work to be done on this, and as I understand from Ray Stokes, executive director at CCWA, he's not planning on bringing this item back to the board until some of this settles out. So we'll just wait and see at this point.
Questions? So I have one just on the Cal Water Fix ongoing thing, and that was I read something online, something my wife also tells me is indicative of cup half full. But it's a letter from somebody who's been here in front of us before, who has some nonprofit entity behind her name. And it referred to the Westlands vote, and it pulled what I thought was a quote out of context and made it sound as if their vote was not in favor due to the uncertainties of the pricing. And I just wanted to get out in front of that, or make sure I really understood, trying to keep up with all the stuff you're sending us. And with what I read as part of the discussion of that decision by Westlands was the disagreement with being responsible for payment for water that was going other places or to other interests. Is that something you remember, or how I recall right?
I would have to research it myself. I wasn't aware of the details on that.
So I guess my point is, when we end up getting in that conversation, I already see, in that discussion in here, I already see stuff being pulled out of context and written out there in public and advocating that it's the end of the world to participate in this thing, which it might be, but I don't think that decision has been made yet. But I see opinions being made out there that are, at least in this particular case, that are very black and white, and So I'm just hopeful that we don't allow those to continually build up to where they become credible by the amount of their being out there in public so much, and that we stay on top of making sure that we put out an accurate message on that.
Commissioner Jordan, I think it's a great point and a probably a fair assessment that I'm not sure that the media reported on the Westlands exactly as the vote occurred. I had heard that rumored to be true, the case as well. And I agree. This is a very controversial project, and we'll do our best to bring information as we have the facts, which are provided through CCWA to its member agencies. And so as we have more information on facts, we'll be sure to bring those forward.
Okay. There's actually a phrase for that, and I forget, or a phrase or a name in the political world of saying something constantly enough eventually equates into enough people believing it, even though it's factually wrong. All you have to do is hit that threshold of saying it so many times, and people just finally believe that it's true. And I hate to see that starting here, if that's true.
And it's a good point. I mean, we're still probably a decade or more out from even initiating probably construction on something like this. And I think what was significant about Metropolitan's decision to move forward with it is moving forward with funding to design so that we can actually get more of this information and costs. So, I mean, we're extremely preliminary at this point. We haven't really done any extensive design work to actually vet a lot of this costing. And then I think the other part of the Westland decision is I think they again have been supportive so far of getting this put in, but I think it's a lot of politics to try and get a better deal out of it than what they are currently facing. Certainly understanding the margins and the amount of water that it takes to grow food. It just takes a lot of water to grow food, period. And for some who are on the margins with some of those crops, it's a big deal to pick up these additional costs. So I think there's a lot to it. I think they'd like to see the Feds step in and pony up and pay some of this, and the Feds have been backing away, not wanting to pay a dime. So
okay.
I think there's a lot to that story. So you're right.
Yes, if it's rather than maybe just load up on once every 6 months, it's 150 pages to read of what's happened since then. If there's stuff that's going on that you see that would be interested just for 3 minutes of a presentation, you could throw it in with the regional agency updates, because I think there's probably something to talk about every month or two that's just an update on where it is, what's happened, what's going on, and then move on, just so it kind of keeps the current perspective fresh in our minds.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Mr. Keller?
When you mentioned earlier the federal agencies, and Mr. Hagmark just mentioned that they're not stepping up, is this what's currently the Central Valley Project?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
the idea is that the twin tunnels would provide water to the Frank Kern Canal and the rest of the Central Valley Project, as well as to the California Aqueduct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll let you out of the seat finally, right? So we'll move on to item D, the approval of purchase order for large Venturi water meters, and Ms. Taylor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Kathy Taylor. I'm the city's water system manager, and I will be taking this item to City Council for the approval for a purchase order for our large Venturi meters, and I'm looking for a recommendation. So as you know, that water accounting is really important for us, and water leaks are inherent to any water system, whether it be through fire hydrants, flushing, or water main breaks, mismetering, or system leaks. And so we've done many efforts to improve our water accuracy. We are trying to better estimate how much water we lose through our water main breaks. We also have that no-des truck, the flushing truck, that's going to recirculate the water during our flushing programs for our hydrants so that we're not losing it. We've also have underway a 5-year program where we are replacing all of our smaller meters, and currently we're at about 16,000 meters that we've replaced of the 24,000. So we've really have put a huge effort into accurate accounting for our water losses. However, recently we had an audit that demonstrated or suggested that our system losses are at 1%, which is overly optimistic. It's to the point where they're suspect. The industry standards are 5 to 10% water loss in a system. So in looking at, what's the next, where should we go next with this? We really believe that the best, short of it, the ultimate would be an AMI system, but the next would be to look at our production meters, which are our large accounting meters. We have 3. One is the Gibraltar penstock. It's a 20-inch meter. The Cater Influent is a 36-inch meter, and then on the South Coast Conduit, which conveys the water down to Montecito and Carpinteria Valley water districts, that's a 30-inch meter. So they're all about 30 years old. The Gibraltar meter and the Cater Influent, they're not true Venturis. And for you scientists here on the board, a Venturi meter, the flow is constricted down, and as it necks down, the velocity of the flow increases, and there's a back pressure that's created, and there's electronic equipment on the valve on the meter that actually can convert that into a metered flow rate for us. Since the Gibraltar and Cater meters are not true Venturis, what that means is they're accurate within a smaller range of flow rates, where a true Venturi would be accurate over a larger flow rate. And with the flows we've been seeing over the past years, with the lower flows, we're speculating that maybe we're not capturing them all. To change out these meters, it has to be done during low flows, which is this winter. And a part of this recommendation is we ask that council find it in the best interest of the cities to waive the bidding process so we can award this work to Primary Flow Signal Incorporated. The reason why we're choosing them is they're a leader in the industry. We have about 10 of their meters up at Cater right now, and they've performed very well for us. Primary Flow Signals would actually, it's not an off-the-shelf item. They have to design it, fabricate it, and send it out to us. So it would take about 11 weeks. So with that in mind and the desire to get on top of our metering accuracy, we're hoping to move forward with this council agenda report.
So to clarify, too, this is just for the metering component. In parallel, we're going to be putting together a set of specs and bidding out the installation work to local contractors to go after that. So the idea is to try and get these things lined up. We'll be doing that bidding process, and we hope sometime in the February timeframe, our meters will be here, and we'll have a local contractor lined up to install these 3 meters, and it will require the shutdown of Cater for probably at least 24 hours, and so we'll be having to network and communicate with all of our neighbors to make sure they're prepared for that shutdown.
Additionally, the funding of this, the South Coast Conduit, since that's how we convey water down to Montecito and Carpinteria Valley water districts, they will be paying 80% of the cost of that valve. And as for the influent valve at Cater, they will be paying just under 40% through our joint powers agreement.
Mr. Geller, go ahead.
Earlier, Mr. Hagmark mentioned the difficulty of getting production values to line up with metered water sales values. So presumably these meters are all the numbers that show up as production. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And it would be what, the Cater Influent minus the amount that's going down the South Coast Conduit is the part that gets ascribed to the city?
Yes, yeah. There's a whole mass balance that goes through when we figure out what went to the city, because there is a portion of water that does go through the South Coast meter that is diverted to Sheffield. So there's another meter downstream that we also take into consideration.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Go ahead, Ms. Bernie.
So we were talking about earlier, the conservation numbers are, so just to be clear, the conservation number is based on production?
That's correct.
Okay, so what I'm gathering is you're assuming that we're actually producing more water than you think, than we're measuring more water. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's where it would go, which is a weird thing for a Venturi meter to do. That's not typically, if they're getting out of whack, because we do have these meters calibrated on a quarterly basis, like the sensors are calibrated. So for them to be error by anywhere in what we're looking at just doesn't seem right either. But we thought we'd start here and continue here with our kind of drilling down and trying to figure out where all the water is going. I think in the end, we may not know until we get to AMI, but this will be another step in helping to close that loop, and at least in our communications with the state, be able to say, we have replaced these 30-year-old meters. We're planning to send them off and have them calibrated by an outside party before they go in. So we can at least close that door and know that that is a sound measurement that's coming from these meters.
Okay. So, I mean, theoretically, if we find that these meters are, theoretically, our conservation's not as high as we think it is.
It may be the case.
Okay. But that's what you're assuming. That's why we're doing new meters.
Right. We're trying to close another door, so we remove that. It's really difficult for us to imagine that these are contributing that much to this, because we do know what's going into Laurel. Mm-hmm. We do have a mass balance that's always going on there, so it would be surprising if this number is significant once we replace these. But we do want to get some better control over this and make sure this isn't. There's not some error coming in here.
Okay. So I guess two questions. Is there a fear that they're going to fail because they're so old then? I mean, if we're not...
Fail? I don't know if fail. There's no moving parts inside of them. So it's a question of, is there corrosion going on in there or tuberculation that's somehow throwing off these measurements? And the way these were constructed, they're not something that's easy to look inside of and to inspect or to test. And so that's part of the design of these new ones. We want to make them a little more accessible potentially so that we can monitor them more on a regular basis. But it's a pretty simplistic technology that is used pretty uniformly everywhere. Yeah.
I guess I'm just not hearing that there's actually a huge problem.
Right. Well, we just don't know. And we feel like this is in our list as we go down it. Seems like, okay, well, let's confirm that this isn't where the air is coming in, because that could potentially be there.
And with the water audit suggesting we have a 1% system loss, that's too optimistic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then just one last question. In the financial information, you talk about Montecito and Carpinteria districts paying part of these costs. Is that already agreed to, or does that still need to be?
No, that's agreed to.
That's agreed to. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
And as part of this recommendation, I'll also be asking that the primary flow signal inventories be added to our standard equipment list, which is something that we update about every 3 years.
So you're moving money for this from the drought fund rather than just paying for it out of the water replacement program capital fund? Why is that?
Well, we discussed that, whether we could go into reserves for this, or if it would be better to go to the drought fund. My understanding is we have money available in the drought fund right now for because there's Joshua could probably speak better to it, or Kelly could, for activities that we plan for, but we don't think that we have to fund anymore. So Ms. Dyer will.
Sure. So last spring is when we prepare our budgets, and at the time we included funding for the emergency pump project at Combe, which has been dismantled, and so we have some savings at Combe because of that can be used toward these meter replacements, which is somewhat related because all these meter measurements are fed into Combe's accounting as well. So that's where the money is coming from.
And then will the reimbursables from the other agencies eventually find their way back to the drought fund?
I mean, it all goes back to our
one big family.
Operating.
I realize,
yeah, it'll be picked up through our revenues from the cater billings, because we have those. That's how we get reimbursed from the Montecito.
Okay.
So I assume in the spring, when this actually gets constructed, you'll come back with another cost for the installation.
Well, it will be the install. Likely will just be a maintenance purchase order, which doesn't require council action. Okay. If there's an interest, I certainly could share that information with you.
I was just curious.
We expect it to be somewhere on the magnitude of
probably less than a third of the cost of the Venturi meters. It's pretty simple, but the Venturi is the big item.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for a recommendation to council on this item.
Yes.
Recommendation.
Thank you.
I will second.
Thanks. Any other discussion or comments?
One quick question, just physically, you're talking about the installation. These things look like a little, like 1 foot long chunk of pipe, I would assume, and you just unbolt the other pipes and stick them in between?
A little bigger than that, but that's the idea. Again, some of these they have to customize and fit in these. Unfortunately, what was there is not a true Venturi, so they were kind of stubby. And the new Venturis are going to be a little longer, so that may drive we may need to cut the pipe and put new flanges on and make them a little longer. All that's going to be part of the replacement. We'll figure that out. But in theory, next time it should be as easy as unbolting and taking.
Right, currently now, I think the Venturi that's required for the Cater Influent is as wide as the vault that it's supposed to go into, so there'll have to be some retrofit of the vault.
Okay, so all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
it's unanimous. Thank you. We're on to last item, Mr. Hagamart's Water Resources Manager Report.
Yes. So just wanting to, this information here, you can cruise through it, but just wanting to kind of highlight some things that maybe Ms. Dyer already touched on, but we have about 3,600 acre feet of Kachuma water in storage right now. Waiting on that 40% allocation from October 1st that the county is sitting on, and that should bring another 3,300 acre feet into our city account. We have brought down 3,100, a little over 3,100 acre feet of water from Gibraltar. And just, again, I think we're pretty conservative on this, but we've gotten 240 acre feet of additional mission tunnel flows over what we had projected. I think we were pretty conservative last year when we were looking at continued dry conditions, but certainly a little punch of rain did help pick up the little tunnel flows, which is great. And then again, highlighting, since this is kind of the end of our water year, the 9,179 acre feet of water used in 2017. I do, just for my own interest, and I will share this with the Water Commission, kind of curious when the city of Santa Barbara last was using that low of a usage. Certainly we know that's below what we were using in 1991. On the second slide, I think we've already went over that in our presentation. Third slide, talking about per capita usage, 12-month routing average at 77 gallons per capita per day, with our 2020 goal of being 117. So we're clearly exceeding that requirement.
Chairman?
Yes.
The 2020 goal is something that we wind up needing to certify to the state. Is that correct?
That's correct. Every year we're there. And I think they are working on a new goal. So we'll see where that comes out. Didn't have any comments on rainfall. Projections for above average temperatures. Equal chances of rainfall for the next 3 months. Doesn't do us much good. I'm not going to, we went over quite a bit of this as part of the drought presentation. I'm going to skip to wastewater flows. And hovering right around 6.4 MGD. Again, it seems to be fairly stable at this point, which is interesting. New normal for us. We'll note on the next page our spills are at 13 this calendar year. A reminder that our goal was 8. Again, we've come a long ways from where we were in 2010 and before that. And keep in mind that we're making progress. Recycled water production, we are meeting demands. And at this point, as we talked about last time, I do believe we're at a kind of a not seeing our production increasing until we finish the secondary aeration basins. So I think we're in a good position. Still trying to explore options to potentially sell excess water. It looks like we have plenty of water 10 months out of the year. It's really how could we accommodate someone during those peak times when we are also needing the water. And then a status update on.
And selling water, you mean to a different water agency or put more customers online within the city?
Well, I think that would be our primary goal would be our own customers, but there really isn't any right now that hanging out there. So it would be the other agencies, mainly the Columbia Mutual Water Company, who has continues to call me on a regular basis, interested in trying to reach an agreement.
And we physically have a way to deliver that reclaimed water to them?
Yeah, actually, it goes pretty much right up to their doorstep. So they would have to do some piping on their side, and so we worked out the general logistics of it. It's just now a matter of kind of lining up, having the water available to do that. Another thing I wanted to, several little other items, wanted to talk just quickly about copies. We make a lot of copies every month and send stuff out in the mail, and just wanted to, this group is very sensitive to our resources and wanting to see if we wanted to make any changes, if there were people who wanted to opt out of getting a hard copy. As part of your packet today, you'll notice this is what Salvatore uses to come up with his agenda. We could send something like this out, which allows you to take notes and potentially your questions rather than making up a whole copy. But we're happy to do whatever the commission would like to do, but just wanted to revisit that effort as we do spend a lot of time making copies and sending stuff out.
Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I look at a lot of documents online, and it wouldn't be a big burden to look at these. Sometimes I do look at these online.
Mm-hmm.
So I could probably do with fewer paper copies.
Okay.
I'd echo that too. I generally just put everything from here in Planning Commission on my iPad and then don't say anything when you throw it at me here again. So,
Okay.
I mean, and I think we've talked about this before too. I'd even appreciate getting staff slides electronically before we get here on a Thursday too. So, I mean, even if that was the night before, just send them along and then you can bury them on your iPad too or something and follow, or you can preview them. So,
You can read the font.
yeah, well, I can read the small print on the color bars. Yeah.
I'd say I physically like having the paper in front of me when I'm sitting here.
Okay.
So that helps me because I don't have an iPad in front of me. So
Do you need, so we mail out a packet, do you need another packet here or just fine with the one that you receive in the mail?
yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
You're left, Megan.
I mean, I'm easy either way. I do appreciate that you have scaled back because we were getting a packet in the mail and a packet here, so I definitely appreciate that. It really just depends on where I am in the world and whether or not I read this in paper or online. So I can go either way. I'm super flexible.
Okay.
But one is definitely enough.
Okay.
We'll leave that. Salvatore took notes, and
Is that
you can customize the
We'll
menu.
try something out and you can tell us if you don't. if you
Only
like
question.
it.
Only question I had in that packet was kind of back to before the legal answer on testing and certification at DSAL. That's not actually producing any water into the system yet, or
It has-
negligible.
Right, it has put water into the system, and today it's not. We're circulating water, but it's not going into the system.
All right.
Yeah.
I see again comments from people that insist they're getting desal water because it's softer and tastes better, and I'm going, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
okay.
It does depend
Yeah.
on the time. Yes.
Okay.
The other point that I did, and the error on my part, is that we had talked about Commissioner Keller stepping down December 31st, and unfortunately we missed the letter of resignation date, which was October 10th.
Oh.
And darn it.
We're telling you you missed it a week later too. We didn't tell you before, did we? So.
I'd like to say, after the disappointment in hearing that you were going to step down, I think I didn't do this on purpose. But so where that kind of puts us is in a position, of course, you can step down at any time. But at this point, we would not be able to fill that position until July 1st. And talking with Mr. Keller, he seems willing to stick around until June 30th. And we'll try and get that letter of resignation in a timely manner this time.
Okay, well, we'll worry about it 6 months from now. But,
Let's worry about it in 4 months, so you can
Okay.
actually get the resignation.
So, anyway.
Skype is a wonderful thing. so,
Well,
Right.
thank you for extending your time with us. We appreciate
Well, I will be in South America in November, so
Okay.
I will miss that meeting.
it. Okay,
okay.
very good. That's all I had.
Anything else to do? Okay, our next meeting will be Thursday, November 16th. Until then, we're adjourned.